At the beginning of 1790, Russia was in difficult position. Its ally successes in previous year had alarmed some European powers. Prussia was the most active, attempting to form an alliance with the Ottoman Empire against Russia. Austrian Emperor Joseph died. The new Emperor Leopold took part in international negotiations on the war's outcome. Under these circumstances, Russia wasn't ready to keep pushing forward. The defense of the conquered territories began. The fighting spirit of the Ottomans was undermined. The vizier even negotiated with Potemkin, but nothing came of it. At sea, Admiral Ushakov's Russian fleet left Sevastopol and defeated the Turkish ships in the Battle of the Kerch Strait. But on land, Russia lost her ally. Under the Treaty of Reichenbach, Austria ceased hostilities against Ottoman Empire. However, in the north, Russia made peace with Sweden. This freed up some Russian forces for the war in the south. The Ottomans actively strengthened their fortresses, Brailov, Silistria and especially Izmail. This defensive line on the Danube was very strong. The Ribas's fleet was intended to assist the Russian troops in capturing these fortresses. It made a long journey from Ochakov along the Black Sea coast and sailed up the Danube. The joint actions of army and fleet ensured the successful capture of the fortresses of Tulcea and Kilia. On November 29th, the Russian fleet arrived near Izmail. The Turkish fleet did not dare to stop the enemy at the fortress's walls. There was an island, Salin, opposite the fortress. Long batteries began to be laid there. The Ottomans tried to interfere and opened fire, but the Russian ships soon silenced the enemy's cannons. The next day, the Russians attacked the enemy fleet and destroyed it. Soon, Russian troops began to actively converge on Izmail. However, the Russian High Command became deeply skeptical about the possibilities of capturing such a strong fortress. Russian troops were experiencing serious supply problems, and army morale was low. Frost set in. Some of the siege guns were even sent back to Benderi. Potemkin debated whether to leave the siege or not. Meanwhile, Suvorov, being in Galatz, received an order to take command of the troops near Izmail. Without wasting any time, he set off, taking a handful of his soldiers with him. On December 13th, Suvorov arrived at the walls of the fortress. Potemkin did not dare to make a final decision. He gave Alexander only permission to leave the siege. But Suvorov was eager to take this fortress, which some considered impregnable. The Ottoman garrison numbered 35,000 men, 17,000 of whom were Janissaries. The artillery was very powerful. They had plenty of ammunition and food. The Russian troops suffered from a shortage of siege artillery. Suvorov had a total of about 31,000 men, including large numbers of Cossacks, who were not particularly useful for capturing fortresses. Izmail was located on high ground, ending in a steep slope at the Danube. The fortress had been strengthened by French engineers. Suvorov, accompanied by his generals, conducted daily reconnaissance. He showed them the routes the columns would take during the assault and the targets they needed to capture. Ladders were prepared. Batteries were set up to the east and west. Suvorov demanded that Mehmet Pasha, the commander of the garrison, to surrender. He politely but firmly refused and asked for a 10-day truce. Suvorov, of course, did not accept this. On December 20, a military council was convened. Suvorov was able to convince the generals that upcoming assault would be successful. With his impassioned speech, everyone in Russian camp was filled with enthusiasm. The soldiers continued to train. Izmail was divided by a low land into the old and new fortresses. The Russian troops were divided into 3 parts and a reserve. The first part, under the overall command of General Pavel Potemkin, 7,500 men, formed 3 columns to capture the old fortress. Lvov's first column was to move along the shore. The second column, led by Lacy, was to take the Brodsky's Gate. The third column, led by Mekhnov, was to attack from the north, where the moat was deepest. The second part was under overall command of Samoilov, with 12,000 men. Its task was to capture the new fortress and one of the bastions of Old One. Orlov's 4th column and Platov's 5th column were to move between the Bender's and Kilia's gates. The 6th column was entrusted to the rising star of the Russian army, Mikhail Illarionovich Kutuzov. He was to storm the Kilia's gate. Finally, the third part of the troops, 9,000 men, was to operate from the Danube under the overall command of Deribas. Arseniev's right column was intended to attack the new fortress. Chepega's middle column was in the center. Markov's left column was preparing to storm the old fortress. The Russians had in total 540 cannons, 40 on land, 100 on the island, and 400 on ships. The Ottoman artillery was half that size, around 250 cannons. On December 21st, the day before the assault, a long firefight began that lasted the entire day. Finally, at 3 a.m. on December 22nd, fog hung in the air. The columns moved smoothly, throwing fascines into the moats, descending into them, and placing ladders against the ramparts. In some places, the height of the ramparts made it necessary to tie the ladders together. The light infantry at the head of the columns was scattered along the fortifications, covering their comrades. The second column engaged in hand-to-hand combat first. A fierce battle with cold weapons broke out. The attack stalled, but other columns were already rushing to join the fight. The first column crossed a wide moat and a series of palisades behind it and attacked the Turks. General Lvov was seriously wounded, but the attack continued. The third column was forced to overcome even bigger obstacles to finally meet the Janissaries, led by Mehmed Pasha himself. During the desperate battle, Mekhnov was wounded, but the Russians captured the bastion. Advancing step by step, the second and third columns joined forces. In the east, the sixth column climbs the fortifications under a hail of grape shot and bullets. Kutuzov, like other column commanders, leads the way. Meanwhile, the fifth and fourth columns are forced to advance across a deep moat filled with water. They climb ladders to the walls. But the Ottomans decide to make a raid through the Bender's Gate on the Russian flank. A confused battle ensued, with troops from both sides mixing in chaos. Seeing the difficult situation in this sector, Suvorov sent the cavalry, which had been held in reserve, as reinforcements. Kutuzov also sent one battalion. The Ottoman attack was repelled. The Russians climbed the ladders again. Orlovs took the bastion at the Bender Gate. But the 6th column still met with stubborn resistance from the Ottomans, and the morale of the soldiers here began to fall. Suvorov decided to encourage Kutuzov by informing him of his appointment as commander of Izmail. The commander gathered his forces and attacked again. Finally, the Russians took the bastion. The 6th and 5th columns joined forces. The Cossacks from the 5th column rushed towards the shore, helping the attacks from the south. The Turkish artillery tried to stop the enemy from landing, but because of the darkness and fog, they couldn't inflict much damage on the Russian ships. As soon as they got close enough, the second line of fleet split up and took up position on the flanks of the first line, whose ships were filled with soldiers. Just like in other parts of the fortress, a stubborn battle raged here. The Turks deserve credit for their bravery that night, which was no less than that of the Russians. Marko was wounded, but the soldiers, despite the loss of many generals and officers, continued to press the enemy. Dawn breaks. The Russians have won at all points. The Ottomans, having lost all their fortifications, retreat deep into the city. They fight to the end. Suvorov gave his troops a little time to rest. Then the final assault begins. Russian troops advanced from all sides. The Ottomans met the Russians in narrow streets, shooting at them from houses. Most stubbornly, the Turks resisted in tough stone buildings, numerous in Izmail. Step by step, Suvorov's army advanced. Some Ottomans were killed, some were taken prisoner. In one occurrence, one of the Turks who had already surrendered wounded a Russian officer. The enraged soldiers killed him and his comrades. To speed up the process of suppressing the remaining resistance, Suvorov ordered the use of 20 cannons. The defenders were hit with grape shot. Some houses were on fire. The civilian population also took part in the defense of Izmail, arming themselves with whatever they could find. After all the horrors of the assault and such stubborn resistance from the Turks, Russian soldiers carried out unnecessary massacres here and there. The battle inside the city had already lasted 6 hours. Finally, the last remnants of the garrison laid down their arms. In total, the assault lasted 12 hours. After that, the city was given to the soldiers for 3 days, as was the custom at the time. Kutuzov became commandant of Izmail. The Ottomans lost about 26,000 men killed, and some of the prisoners later died from their wounds. This number also includes civilians. The victors captured 200 cannons and more than 300 banners, along with large supplies of ammunition and food. Officially, Russian losses numbered 4,600 killed and wounded. In reality, they could well have reached 10,000. Among them were 400 officers, out of 650 before the assault. The capture of Izmail was one of Suvorov's greatest achievements. The song Thunder of Victory Resound was dedicated to this triumph and became Russia's unofficial national anthem for several decades. Suvorov could have been promoted to field marshal, but his complicated relations with Potemkin at the time prevented this. Alexander had to wait 4 more years for this rank. After Izmail, the war was effectively decided. The Ottoman Danube line had collapsed, and the empire no longer possessed the strength to recover. Russian pressure continued through next year, while diplomacy replaced battle as the Ottomans sought to limit further losses. The conflict ended with the Treaty of Yashi. The Ottomans formally accepted the loss of Crimea, recognizing it as Russian territory. Russia gained the northern Black Sea coast, with the Dniester set as its new frontier. For the Ottoman Empire, Izmail marked another step in a long decline. Its fortresses could be taken, its armies defeated, and its strategic initiative lost. The balance of power in Eastern Europe had shifted. For Russia, the capture of Izmail marked its arrival as a major European power. Its army and navy had proven themselves, and the Black Sea had become a Russian sea.